If the kind of job that I end up with at the end of the day is directly correlated with the amount of confidence I feel, then I should do everything I can to invest in that and invest in an accountability system and invest in like people that are in this journey with me that will keep the momentum going.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm excited to talk to Natasha today. She just recently transitioned into a customer success manager role, a CSM role, and she's going to unpack a little bit about her journey and how she went about it and how she ultimately got into the new role that she's just about to start in tomorrow. So, Natasha, thanks for joining me today. I'm excited to talk to you about your career transition journey into becoming a CSM. I'd love to hear from you a little bit about you and then also why you decided you wanted to get into a CSM role in a tech company to begin with.
Thanks for having me. So, my background is in education and consulting. And right before I am now making this career transition, I was working in the world of nonprofits. And ultimately, being in that job, what I was feeling was a sense of discomfort in the pace, but also I knew that there were things that, like skills that were innate to me, that I really wanted to be celebrated for. And it didn't feel like there was the space to do that in the world of nonprofits because it's a slow moving industry. And as I did a lot of self exploration, it seemed like a CSM role in tech was really where I could flourish and be celebrated for the things that I'm innately good at and have passion for.
That's great. So you were looking for more challenging work and also work that better aligned with your skills and what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. So that's great to hear. And it sounds like CSM really aligns well with that. I'm curious, like as you started to think about your career transition, how you'd go about pivoting into a CSM role in a tech company, like how did you think about approaching that transition?
At first, I tried to dive into what are the main skills a CSM needs in order to be successful at their job and tried to match it up to see which skills do I have, where are the gaps, and figure out kind of a way to not only move forward for my own self confidence, but also a way to move forward to pitch myself to say, hey, even though I haven't held this job title before, this is me using all of these different skills previously, and I feel confident that I can do the role and ramp up quickly. Yeah, I would say that the beginnings of all of that were just looking at the skills that I had and didn't have. And then the next iteration was something that I actually got from the one of the Better Career group coaching sessions. And it was looking at those gaps and seeing, okay, how do I either communicate through this or upskill in time to be able to say, okay, even though I haven't had a CSM role before, here's how I filled this gap. And I really do feel that confidence to move forward. So in my networking conversations, someone mentioned the course Success Hacker or Success Coaching. I think it's called by both names, but their CSM courses and their certification program is something I signed up for. And I can see that that was actually instrumental in not only me landing the job that I have now, but in me learning the language of a CSM through this process to be able to better translate my previous experience into the role of a CSM.
Yeah, that's hugely important. Is in working with a lot of different career changes that we work with, certainly being able to number one, identify skill gaps and figure out how to close those quickly, but also understanding the terminology and the concepts that are very, very core to the role are very important, especially when you get into interviews, because you need to be able to speak to what you understand of the role, speak the language they're talking about when you're talking to a hiring manager for that particular role. So no, it's really great that you took that approach. I'm curious maybe to take a few steps back, or maybe just throughout the process, like where did you feel like you had the biggest challenges, or maybe the biggest concerns or hesitations as you were going through the process? Because I know it's, going through any career transition like you went through, there's a lot of unknown, uncertainty, and self-doubt sometimes. But I'm just curious to understand how you thought about some of the challenges that you would run into as you went through your transition.
That's an interesting question because I do think of it really in phases and different stages, even though this process isn't linear at all. But I think that the first phase for me was understanding what I was good at and doing some self reflection and then choosing a role to target. I knew that if I was just like, I want to move into tech, B2B SaaS, whatever it was, and I didn't really have a target role, it would be very confusing for me. So once I picked that target role, and that happened through some iterative conversations, once I picked that target role, then it was the biggest challenge after that came when I made the first version of my resume, or version 5 or whatever it ended up being, and started sending it out and getting the rejections or no response. And one, I got almost no feedback from hiring managers. And I was getting feedback from some friends, which was helpful, friends who are in the industry and hold these roles. But hiring managers that I was actually looking to speak with for open roles weren't giving me any feedback, except one person said to me, they said, "It doesn't look like you have much CSM experience, so we're not interested in having a conversation." And it was for a CS associate role. And I thought, wow, like if I need CSM experience for an associate role, first of all, that doesn't really translate for me, but I knew that I wasn't communicating the what my previous experience in the language I needed to in order for a hiring manager to scan my resume quickly and say, yeah, I can see that she can do this. So there were several iterations of that. Both, you and Maddie did LinkedIn review, resume review, those kinds of things, which were helpful and also helpful to give me some confidence. And then I went and took the Success Hacker course, and that gave me better language to do those iterations. And also, I took my resume from purely a chronological resume where I was listing my job experience and had like a little professional summary at the top. And I added a section below the professional summary that was the top 3 skills that I felt like a CSM needed. And then listed bullet points of my specific experience underneath that. So I could show a hiring manager, okay, yeah, I haven't held this role before, but these are the skills that I believe are important for this role. And here's how I've executed on those previously. And I think that that was really the biggest challenge to get to that resume. And then also the turning point of, okay, now I can apply with this. And now I'm getting feedback.
That's great. And I love the point you made too about listing relevant skills, but not just listing the skills, providing an example of how you have that experience and how you've demonstrated that skill in the past. That's so important because so oftentimes we see resumes that just have skills listed. And even if they're relevant skills, if they're not backed up by some sort of evidence that you've done this before, they're not really compelling to a recruiter or hiring manager. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm curious now, just to move on, like through your journey, talk me through how you were able to then ultimately get interviews. Like, was there anything that specifically that you felt helped you stand out to employers to ultimately land interviews?
I would say the networking efforts that I did were huge, but ultimately the job that I ended up landing, there wasn't any contact that I had with anyone at the company.
Okay.
So it was interesting. There was many interviews that were happening for me simultaneously, and then this is the one that panned out first and was the one that I was most interested in. So yeah, the what really had me stand out just to even get those interviews, which are helpful practice for the job I ultimately landed, but that was really my networking efforts for sure. And I think that even not just networking efforts for referrals, but networking efforts to help continue the conversation. It's like I imagine this process kind of like learning a new language. It's like I'm learning the language of hiring and recruiting and selling myself as a candidate. And in the networking conversations, they're kind of like I'm going to a meetup group to learn and speak that new language as in like a practice. So that was helpful to get feedback and just like the general feedback that humans have in conversation to see what am I communicating that's landing, what am I communicating that's a bit off the mark, and how can I illustrate a message that makes me feel like I'm already in this industry.
Yeah, I love that. Especially the fact that a lot of people think about networking ultimately try to get referrals into an organization, right? And that is important, and that's ultimately what we want to get is try to get referrals, and because that helps you get into interviews and eventually hired. But to your point, those networking conversations have so much value in that you learn so much about the target role, because you're meeting with people that are in that industry, that are in that role, that are speaking the language. And like you said, you're able to really refine how you talk about your experience, your skills, to make it sure that it resonates with people that are already in that field. And that's so important. That's such an important step when you're making a big pivot into a brand new role, brand new industry. So I'm glad you covered that and brought
It
that up.
it just
Um,
to jump in here,
oh
it
yeah,
actually was I find that approaching the networking conversations like that as an opportunity to chat, to learn, and to just practice in conversation, that made networking so much easier because networking for the sake of getting a referral, it's like going on a date for the sake of finding a husband to have babies with, and it's like right away. It's like weird.
totally.
There's an awkwardness about it. And I've gone to so many networking events over this process, and it's like, oh, it's such a sad missed opportunity when I can see people going around the room and it's not business cards now, it's just like the LinkedIn QR codes, and they're like trying to add as many people as
Oh
possible
yeah.
on LinkedIn before they leave, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness." So I was really happy for the side one-off conversations I had at these networking events, to meet really cool people, but also to have conversations that don't even have anything to do with work, but just to interact with another cool human being that's in the same space. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
learning and treating it like the opportunity that it really is instead of just like, oh, do you want to give me a referral? It's like, do you want to get married to have babies? It's like, oh, that's a little bit of a turnoff. Let's move on.
100%. No, that's a great analogy. It's so spot on because you're right. There's so many people that approach networking calls that way, and it just never goes well, and really works against you if you're taking that approach. And so yeah, and it's so much easier, like you said, just to go in and have a learning conversation. It just puts you at ease too, makes you more confident going in those conversations anyways. So I love that. Let's move on to now that you're in the interview process for some of these companies, especially the one that you ultimately got the job offer from. What are some things that you did throughout the process that you felt helped you really stand out and impress the hiring team enough to not only give you a job offer, but also to bump up your title to a senior title?
I would say that in the interview process for the job that I ultimately landed, something that I did that I wanted to do to showcase my skills, but I did just because of my own curiosity, was I prepped for that first interview like I would prep for a client call. It's like, who am I speaking with? What's their background? Just anything I could figure out on the internet about those people was what I wanted to learn. So I could go into the interview not only like having intelligent questions to ask, but also prepped with who is the human being that I'm speaking with. Not what company am I having a conversation with, but who's the human being that I'm having a conversation with. Because ultimately, it's a human being that's going to make a decision whether or not to hire me. It's not a company. I remember in my interview for the company that I ended up landing a job with, I was speaking with her, and I had done some research prior. So the woman that was interviewing me, in her previous work and what she ultimately started, how she started her career with this company was as an executive coach. And I have a background in coaching. So when I saw that, I was like, ooh, I want to know more about this woman. And as she was speaking with me in the interview, we were really getting along really well. And she asked me at one point the question of, what would be really important to you to have in this role? And the answer I gave was, I said, would you coach me? And she lit up like a Christmas tree. Now, that wasn't an answer to like get in her good books or anything like that. That answer was like a genuine answer because I'm so committed to being coached and growing. And that's just a part of like the core of who I am and what I believe in. So for me to say that, and then the follow-up conversation that came after that, I could tell that that ignited that same value in her, and I think ultimately that was one of the most impactful moments in my interview. But it was kind of off script in a way.
Yeah, off script, but because you also did your research too, and you knew like her background was and what she was excited about. But it seemed to align, not necessarily that you were responding that way because of that, but it aligned well because you did some research and maybe it was unconscious even in some way. All right, so now you have got to the end of the interview process. You impress this hiring team so much. They give you your job offer. They actually give you a senior title as well, which wasn't the original role you were interviewing for. So that's super exciting and really awesome that you were able to impress them that much. Talk to me a little bit about your experience in the Better Career program as you went through it. What are some things that you feel like you got value from and really helped you as you made your career transition into this new role?
There's so many things I could say to this question, but I'll focus on I'll focus on three of them. One was the regular group coaching sessions that happened every week. They were really valuable. Then there was the resource hub that was really valuable. Like so, and I'll talk about why those two are valuable in conjunction. Every time I've tried to take a deep dive into how do I market myself as a candidate, how do I make a career transition, how do I get a job, all of those things, there's a lot of things that people will say and rhyme off of, oh, you should do this, or oh, like, you should create a 30, 60, 90-day plan. But in conjunction with the way that you do it in the group coaching sessions, it's not like you bring up the topic and then we should go and figure out how to do it. It's like you bring up the topic, you have us do a little bit of work in that session to kind of get us going and over the hump of the resistance of even creating that, or like getting over the question of where do I even start? You get us over that already in the group coaching session. And then the resource hub is so great because then I can go there, and I did go there after those calls to rewatch the call to see what I missed, if there's a question I had around anything, but then also to look at the templates that you already have written for us. So those things, it's like, yes, I'm learning this new skill of how to market myself as a candidate, but I felt so supported the whole way. So the group coaching sessions and the resource hub, amazing pair. But the third thing I'll say is that with any program like this, there's definitely the accountability that's really helpful for everyone in my position. And hand in hand with the accountability is the confidence that I was able to build. I remember years ago when I was looking for a job and I was thinking to myself, I just had this truth around the statement that the job that I get, the kind of job that I get, will be determined by the confidence I have going into this process and the confidence I have in myself. Knowing that, I thought it's up to me to increase that level of confidence in any way that I can. But the job search process can be really demoralizing a lot of times. And most of the time, especially just as human beings, like rejection isn't something that I love or most people love, but we get it so often because there's so many applications being put out. But the level of confidence and the momentum that those group coaching calls had me feeling, and had the feedback that you and Maddie were giving, it's like all of that were little boosts. Like you were pumping my tires as I was like driving down the road of the career journey, and they were deflating. And then I would come back on the call and you'd pump the tires up again. And it's like, okay, yeah, I can keep going. I can keep going. And all of that was really valuable. And even that honestly feels like an understatement, because like if the kind of job that I end up with at the end of the day is directly correlated with the amount of confidence I feel, then I should do everything I can to invest in that, and invest in an accountability system, and invest in like people that are in this journey with me that will keep the momentum going, because there's going to be an end to this process of getting a job. And not that that's really the end, but there is that like checkpoint. And everything I can do prior to that, the more I can invest in that period of time, the greater my rewards will be. And then ultimately, how that will carry me through the next iterations of my career, like it's just exponential. So I feel really grateful that I stumbled upon one of your webinars and showed it to a bunch of my friends and was like, this is gold. Oh my gosh, I can't stop listening. And I feel grateful that I made the investment for sure.
That's so great to hear. I mean, it just warms my heart too, because, a big part of what we strive to do is create not just some course, but a community and a place where we can like support you and everybody else, and everybody can support one another. So it's good to hear that, accountability and just having a place to to go to like also, yeah, keep you going and inflate your tires to keep you on the road, right, towards your new goal. I love that analogy. I just love, you telling that story. So thanks for doing that. Maybe as we wrap up here, just like any final advice that you would want to give to somebody who's looking to make a career pivot into a new role in the tech industry, whether it's a CSM role or any other type of role, what advice would you leave us with?
I would leave them with the advice of take a course in whatever you're going for. If it's a CSM role, take a CSM course and make it beyond just like a quick LinkedIn learning thing. Like actually dive into something that's going to really give you some solid language and understanding. And then use what you learn in that course to reiterate on your resume. It's your key marketing tool, reiterate on your LinkedIn, and also reiterate on the scripts, whether they're written down or not, those kinds of conversations you're having, ultimately, so you can create a sense of cohesive language. And then beyond that, I would say, like, you have to invest in supporting your mental health in this process. It can be too demoralizing to be a job seeker, especially in today's market where every job is getting 500, 1,000 plus applications. The amount of rejections you'll receive is just so huge that you have to protect your own minds. And one way to do that is being in community and keeping the momentum going. But whatever way you do that, whether you like get a therapist temporarily or you lean on one that you already have, or you're in a community and you need an outlet to bitch about this process, because it's not appropriate to do that in your networking conversations. So you need to get it out somewhere. But when somebody at a networking event asks you, how are you doing? The wrong answer is, man, this job process was really tough. You want to be selling yourself in those moments. So yeah, protect your mental health. It's really necessary.
I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that because it's something we don't talk about a lot. We talk about all these things you have to do, like update your resume, update your LinkedIn, focus on doing good interviews. But what we forget about is like the mental drain and emotional roller coaster you go on through a job search process or a career transition. And so you're right. I mean, I'm really, really glad you brought that up because it is so important to make sure we're intentional about finding ways to keep our sanity and our mental health in good shape. Well, Natasha, thank you so much for joining me today and talking us through your journey. I really hope that it helps at least one person, but I'm sure it'll help many more out there as they think about approaching their career transition as well. So thanks for joining me today.